Theo-Humanism, Blog 5, The Life of a Stranger.
Do you ever feel like a stranger in a world of endless faces? You don't recognize them, nor they you? The Stranger by Albert Camus, 20th century French thinker, tells a story that describes our world in that way. You might gaze at the world endlessly in search of order and meaning, but order and meaning it does not yield, no truth about existence. All the world really is matter, to be arranged and rearranged at will. There's actually nothing fixed, nothing to make us feel we're at home. As we reflect on Camus' novel, keep in mind the following questions. First, what causes our alienation? Is it the world or a way of viewing the world? Second, are we destined to be subject to the machinery of the world, or is there a way to be free? Third, if we're called to be strangers to the world, what's the best way to do so? The main character is a man named Meursault, on trial not simply for murdering a fellow human, but for feeling no remorse for the crime. The setting, Algeria under the French Empire, alludes to the myth we all accept, that power is what orders life and gives it meaning. The law of the state is what makes all things right, right? There's no existence beyond its rules, no other authority by which we discover realities beyond the appearances. The myth that power is what orders life and gives it meaning imprints all of society with rituals we take as truths. We go along with it, but all it really is machinery, a set of devices of our own making. Peer beyond them, there's nothing there, nothing real, no truth. Meursault gets it. He's indifferent to all convention. At his mother's funeral, he smokes and drinks coffee. Her death means nothing to him, nor the idea of being bound to another in love. What's the point when, look closely, it's all a mirage? Nothing's there to guide Meursault, only the feeling of being excited or annoyed in the moment. The lawyers concoct a backstory to explain the crime. There's no point for Meursault to speak. The script's already been written by the machinery's media. The only way to resist is by not caring. Only by not taking any of it seriously can you be free of the machinery's rituals that are presented as life's truths, and that tell you what to think and what to believe. You can't escape the machinery, it's all around you. Only by being indifferent to its rituals can you be existentially free. Meursault finds salvation, not in the words of the prison chaplain, which represent one last attempt by the machinery to convince him of its truths, but in defiant rejection of them. There's a moment when he wonders if he'll be pardoned, but the machinery, he realizes, can only punish those who question its rituals. Mercy, if granted, would imply there's another way. Meursault can only hope that the state not botch his punishment, execution by decapitation, lest it be forced to repeat it. Herein lies a key point. If there's no mercy to be had, why should one feel remorse? The only reason to feel remorse is if there's hope for redemption. But nothing of the sort is forthcoming from the machinery. And here's the kicker. Remorse is the sign that one takes responsibility for one's crime. Oddly, the machinery of the modern moment teaches us not to be responsible. Let me repeat the idea another way. The modern moment asks us to forgo responsibility. Let's take it step by step. First, the state sets the rules of existence, but has no mercy to offer. Second, no mercy, no remorse. What's the point of feeling remorse if there's no hope of mercy? Just ask underclass youth in societies where the elite view them with disdain. It's very easy to become hardened if there's no hope. Third, no remorse, no responsibility. If you have no remorse for your failings, are you really responsible? Let me repeat, we're educated in this modern moment to believe in the state as the highest authority over our lives, but the state is not a merciful being. No mercy, no remorse. Why be responsible? In this way, oddly, indifference gets planted in the soul. Do you ever find yourself indifferent to what happens out there in the world beyond your mind? If so, do you ever ask yourself what makes you indifferent? It's not about being unfeeling, it's about being existentially indifferent. The question is one that higher education has to confront. If all the modern university teaches is that there's no truth beyond the cosmos, nothing but a vast machine, the rules of which the state claims to represent, isn't it only really teaching students to be indifferent? The figure of Meursault makes us anxious, not over our pre-existential origin or our post-existential destiny, but over our being in a world that, on its own, yields no meaning. We so want to believe there's order to existence that we'll gladly accept to live by illusions, the rituals of the machinery. But we're not naive. We do see the illusions, and yet the prospect of being the stranger, that's too much. Meursault rejects the face of God that the chaplain calls him to recognize in the folds of existence. But here we pause to ask, has Meursault confused the face of God with the power of the state? Camus, like Meursault, is caught in a moment. His modern schooling had taught him that the state is the arbiter of universal truths. The state, then, is God. Meursault rejects this God's face, but is it God? If it is, if the state is the only deity left for us to obey, then the only route to redemption is to reject it as a false deity. And yet it's everywhere. The only way to be free of it is to make oneself a stranger to the rituals over which it presides. The only way to be free is to make oneself a stranger to the world. Meursault embraces the mission. In the end, all he wants is for a crowd to gather at his execution and greet him with cries of hate for his indifference to all that they hold true. However, unexpectedly, in his defiance of the world, he's rehumanized. He remembers his mother affectionately, the face of his lover longingly. It's not just a restoration of his emotions. When he takes his stand as a stranger to the modern world, a human spirit returns to him. Only by revolting against a machinery that strips us of our humanity can our humanity be regained. Camus was not the first to try to explain our state of alienation. Did he get it right? A Muslim thinker of the 11th century, Abu Hayyan al-Tawhidi, offers perspective. In a way, he was the Camus of his day, rejecting his society's pride in its definitions. He noticed that the closer you get to God, the more you feel a stranger in the world. Alienation, ghurba in Arabic, is the goal. We are created to be strangers in this life. After all, the world's destined to pass. However, according to Abu Hayyan al-Tawhidi, nearly 1,000 years ago, we're to respond to the state of illusion not with indifference, but with ever sharper awareness of being close to God, in whose presence all sense of being alienated fades away. Aware of God, beyond the world, yet still with us in its midst, we see ourselves as we're meant to be, heaven's representatives, not hostages to the machinery. St. Paul, decisive interpreter of the gospel, had a similar view. He said that our true citizenship comes from heaven. It was no abstraction. The machinery of the empire might pretend to honor you with its citizenship, but it's really a ruse, meant to blind you to the lie that it's your true home. For Paul, when you grasp your true citizenship, you're free of the machinery. Was he the Camus of his day? Camus and St. Paul both said we're to be strangers to the world, but Camus called for indifference, Paul for new life in the spirit of Christ. You can't explain the difference simply by invoking Camus' atheism. Not all atheism is the same. We have to be more precise. We have to ask whether Camus had actually backed himself into a corner existentially, leaving himself with no other option than to reject the world. He was honest about the machinery, but did he fail to see another side to the world, one that it might make sense to embrace existentially? Atheism has a funny history. According to the Bible, you're atheist not for denying God's existence, but for worshiping God falsely, for masking your evil behind your prayer. If you're not merciful to those who suffer, help those in need, defend the weak, you may say you're a believer, but it's clear that your prayer has no effect in your soul, and so you cannot say that you're actually worshiping God. Oddly, the first Christians were called atheists for rejecting the deities of the Roman Empire. More oddly still, in early modern Europe, Christians began to call one another atheists. How could those who reject the creed of the king or queen be true believers? Even more oddly, by Camus' time, the state had become the religious authority over the world. By his time, heaven had been banished from existence. No realm apart from the secular one, no authority but that of the state that presides over it. But no society lives without a myth. Heaven banished, no myth was left but the false one, that the machinery of the state issues the rules of existence and that it alone has authority over the world. This was what Camus had been taught. The only way to be free of it was to be indifferent to existence. Paul, too, rejected the false myth that peace can only be realized thanks to the mighty state. Unlike Camus, Paul did not see existence as but machinery. He saw the empire as machinery, but the world as shot through with a divine spirit. Not only that, this divine spirit, he saw, is meant to be planted in our souls to remake us as heavenly citizens, created for divine love, and therefore ordered by a divine love in all that we do. It's not the machinery of the empire, but divine love, closeness to God, that brings true peace to the soul and to the world. The idea led Paul to spread the good news, not in defiant rejection of the world, but in hope of repurposing the world and the empire for which it stood with a heavenly spirit that unites both lowly and mighty around the single table of God's goodness. As always, dear friends, I leave you with a question, not whether we share a single vision of ultimate reality. Camus and Paul did not. But we all do share a key condition needed to take responsibility and to pursue a common good together. How do you intend to be a stranger to the machinery of the world? There's no way to pursue a common good together without that condition. Until the next Theo-Humanism posting, adios.